So 2 home runs, 3 RBIs, takes away probably 2 runs there defensively. That's 5 runs he's involved in. Matt Chapman. Olsen skies one high and deep to right field toward the corner. Adele onto the track near the wall, leaps up and got it. Makes the catch for out number 3. Olsen. On he goes. Which is hit out towards center field. That's smoke. That is going to be into the bushes. A 2-run home run for McCutcheon. And the Phillies take a 2-0 lead.
Here's another 3-2 going again as Soto hits one high in the air, right center field. Brinson near the wall, leaps, and he makes the catch! Lewis Brinson makes an unbelievable catch over the wall in center field.
All right, everybody. Welcome into this very latest edition of the Belly Up Fantasy Live Baseball Show. We are back after taking the July 4th weekend off. And, of course, I'm your host, Kevin. And joining me, as pretty much always, we got Vince, who is the host of his own podcast, the Sports Stove Podcast, which can be seen anywhere that you get your social media. And so, Vince, how are we doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Kev. It was nice to have the week off, and from this, we still had to work regular real jobs, but It was nice to have that little break for the 4th of July, celebrate fireworks, food, all that good stuff, and now we're back at it, right? And I'm looking forward to today's episode.
We're back at it, and I got to spend some time in the great state of Utah, and I was actually able to broadcast live the Fantasy Dynasty show that I'm in. I was able to do that live from my mom's dining room. So that was kind of cool. And she sat there and watched me do it live. So that was pretty cool. And so, but, you know, as you said, we are back at it right now. And we have something special going on this episode of the Belly Up Fantasy Live show. And because we have Brian Scott joining us from the Injured List podcast.
I'm going to give you some details on Brian here, Kev. Okay. Unless you saw this and you're going to do it. Brian Scott, he's a physician assistant in orthopedic surgery. He's an injury expert, former athletic trainer, and he's the Belly Up creator of the Injured List podcast, as you mentioned, Kevin. So there you go. Welcome in, Brian.
Hey, guys. How are you?
All right. So, Brian, how are we doing this fine Sunday night?
Doing well. Cannot complain.
We always like it when we can't complain. Sometimes we might want to, but we're not going to do that tonight.
All right.
We actually brought Brian on so we could complain about our players that have been on our injured list.
Because there are certainly enough star players.
Yeah, judging by my notes here, I got quite a list. You guys got quite a few issues, so we're going to hash them out.
So there are some issues that are out there in baseball, and we're not talking about guys that are just hitting 187. No, we're talking about some of the star players that are in baseball. And I don't know about you, Vince, but because we only have 3 injured list spots, I don't have enough spots to put all the guys that are injured. So we have to make decisions regarding who we're going to put in our IL spot, who are we going to cast and just wait how things are going to work out. I know you got 3 guys on your injured list, don't you, Vince?
I do. Yeah, just with Profar's concussion, I got him back on. And Jimenez came off the injured list, and I had an open spot, and Profar got the concussion, so I've filled it back up again, just like that.
Just like that. So, Brian, one of the players that I'd like to get started with, which has interest for me personally in my fantasy life, and that is the pitcher Jacob Degrom, who has made a couple of rehab starts. He's supposed to make another one on Wednesday or Thursday. And when we last saw Jacob Degrom, he was the best pitcher to be found in all of baseball. So, Brian, with him apparently on the comeback trail, what kind of pitcher should we expect, him to be in the second half going forward?
So I actually, last time I was on Vince's show on the Sports Stove, we talked about Jacob, and Vince had asked me what I thought, how that was going to kind of play out. And Vince, if you remember, I said he's going to take his time. They're not going to rush him back. And here we are, probably several months later now. He's just starting to get worked back into the rotation and doing a couple of rehab starts, which is what I expected all along. And I expect what you just saw. I expect dominant Degrominator back in action as soon as he gets called up to the bigs, which shouldn't be long. One more, I think, rehab start, and then he's going to make his season debut. He's already on his 5-day rotation schedule, so he's just got to up his pitch count, and sounds like things are going great. If the statistics speak for themselves, he's been dominant at that level, which we'd expect. So I expect him to pick up right where he's left off every time he's come back from a little setback. So I expect to see the Jacob Degrom of old. I don't think this injury is going to have any lasting effects on him. This has been a well-handled injury. There was no sense to rush him, no need to rush him back early this year with Scherzer on rotation and the way the Mets are playing offensively and how they're winning games.
Well, that's certainly good news to me because, like I said, in the other league, Vince, that I'm in, somebody quite stupidly, quite frankly, dropped him. And I had the first waiver claim. So I, of course, dove into action and got him. And so, Brian, if you're saying that he's going to come out and just be pretty much have no restrictions, kind of like Max Scherzer, and just he's going to be, be able to pitch to the 6th, 7th inning, whatever it is, he is a monster addition to anyone's fantasy roster.
Oh, without a doubt. And with the way the Mets are playing, they're going to need to ride him into the playoffs, hopefully, and well into the postseason. So I don't foresee them doing anything crazy with him. If he has any type of setbacks, don't be surprised if they act very conservative and shut him down again during the year if he has any type of glitch. So whether it be a minor thing or something more serious, but the Mets have afforded themselves the luxury of not having to rush him back, which is going to help them further down the line, which is when the Mets notoriously have problems. And if you can't tell, I'm a Mets fan, and I'm from New York.
I'm getting ready to say, Brian.
Otherwise, I would never give my commentary. Otherwise, I don't get into all this analysis. But when it comes to the Mets, I have to analyze them because I've followed them my whole life. So,
well, Kev, you look at the standings right now. Atlanta's a game and a half back, and the Mets have not been playing bad. The Braves are just playing so good. So you're talking about Degrom coming back. Scherzer's been back now for a couple games or a game, whatever. It's not been very long. And then and now you add Degrom to that. My question is, and I said on my show, I said 2 different things in 2 different shows, Kev. First show, I said, I think I said the Braves will win the East. And then the next show, I was like, you know what? I don't know. Now that you think about it, you got Degrom coming back. Scherzer back. The offense has been decent all year so far for New York. So I don't know. What do you think, Kev? Can the Braves catch up? Can they overtake? Can they win the division? Or is it the Mets division to lose?
Well, if he'd asked me that question a month ago, I would have said the Mets.
Yeah.
But the Braves have come off like wildfire. And we all know what the Braves are capable of. We saw it last year. We were in the exact same position. They weren't even I believe they weren't even 500 last year at this point in the season. And then they went ahead and came down the stretch, steamrolled, and everybody knows they got in the playoffs. Once you get in the playoffs, anything can happen. And it happened for them. It was a magical season. They got my Dodgers out of the playoffs and went ahead and they won the World Series. So I got to stay with whoever the defending champion is until you knock them out. I'm going to stay with them. But the Mets getting Jake Degrom back, and Brian, if you're correct, and he's like anything comes close to what he's been in the past, that's a huge addition for them. And so when you look at the standings, there are not a lot of exciting divisional races to look forward to, but I think that NL East race is going to be something to behold. Definitely.
Hey, I want to stay in division and in position. They're in the NL East, but not quite, fighting for the top of the division. But the Washington Nationals, Steven Strasberg, he came back, pitched one, not even a full game, and immediately went back on the injured list. But we're mainly thinking fantasy here. And Steven Strasberg is a guy who has a great name, has been great at one time. He's always had injury issues, but for fantasy teams looking at Strasberg, maybe adding him on here for a stretch run and even coming into fantasy playoffs kind of role. Brian, what can we expect out of Steven Strasberg? What's his injury like, and how is that going to affect him?
So from what I've read, it's not good. Apparently, he's had a recurrence of an issue that shut him down last year, which was this thoracic outlet syndrome, which people may be familiar with because Matt Harvey had a similar issue in surgery while he was on the Mets years ago. And if I'm not mistaken, Strasberg, his season was ended prematurely last year because of this. And if this is recurring, this is a big problem. This is not a simple fix. It's a very difficult condition to treat. It usually has to do with the anatomy up in the neck down into the shoulder area. It has to do primarily with the nerves and the vasculature in this area getting compressed or pinched or irritated due to the mechanical anatomy of that region. And you see it quite a bit in overhand athletes like baseball pitchers, more so probably than any other athletes, because their muscles here in this part of their shoulder girdle and their neck get hypertrophied or built up and stronger, and that causes increased compression and stuff on these structures. So it's a very difficult thing to treat. And if he's having symptoms after having had surgery already for that, I don't think it's a simple fix. It's going to involve probably a lot of shutdown time, and who knows, maybe even the season again if he has to go back under the knife. So it's not good news if you're a Strasberg fan.
Oh, Kevin, you hear that?
I hear that. And so that says to me, Brian, that there would be no reason whatever to put him on a roster and just put him on an IL spot. It would just be better just to cast him and just hope that he's better next year. Wouldn't you agree with that, Brian?
I mean, I always say proceed with a little bit of caution until there's more information out there. You know, a lot of times in the press, they'll put out stuff very quickly, but it's not necessarily accurate. It wouldn't hurt to hold on a little bit longer. I'm not sure if he's still undergoing some testing or whatnot, but from what I've read so far, if that's the early indication, that's not a good sign.
And that's pretty much what you did, Vince, wasn't it? You started him, and then he went right back to the IL, so you dropped him, didn't you, Vince?
Yeah. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. I'm a risk taker. I like going out and getting guys that are coming off of injuries. I like getting guys that are making their debuts, those kinds of things, and seeing what happens. Because if they hit, then you've struck a gold mine. Strasburg's one of those guys where I kind of went on his name and said, "Hey, this is a guy who at one time was maybe the best pitcher in the league." And so I'm going to go ahead and take a shot with him. Yeah, that first game was horrible. I think he went maybe 3 innings. I don't remember.
Yeah, it was bad. He gave up, what was it, 7 runs, Vince?
It was a bunch of runs. Yeah, because we talked about why didn't they pull him out, all that kind of stuff. But yeah,
right,
then he immediately went back to the injured list, and I was like, nah, I don't got time. Nobody got time for that. So we sent him packing, hoping to maybe pick him up again later. Now hearing this, I'm thinking I might just avoid Strasberg at all costs.
Now, I don't know too much about the specifics, but most of the time when this injury happens, it's the nerves that are getting injured or traumatized. In a few, that's like 95% of the time. Like the rest of the time, it's either the veins or sometimes arterial blood supply coming through that region. And if I thought I read somewhere that Strasberg dealt with one of the vasculature issues, which is very rare. This is more commonly seen though in overhand male athletes because they usually participate in baseball, whereas in softball and pitchers, whereas in softball, obviously they're throwing underhand, so it's not the same kind of issue. But yeah, man, not good at all.
Not good. You want to stick with pitchers? No. Pitchers, Kev, you got another pitcher?
Pitchers, let's see. Pitchers. Another guy that I know is of interest to both you and I, Vince, because he's on my fantasy team and also because he pitches for your Milwaukee Brewers. And, of course, I'm talking about Freddie Peralta. And maybe we don't need to be in such a hurry to get him back because his season before he was injured wasn't going as well as a guy that was taken in the top 10 spots of a draft. And because he had a 4.42 ERA. That's somebody you can get in the 10th round, not just, let alone the first. And so he went down in June. He went to the 60-day IL, And so, Brian, what can we look forward to, if anything, out of Freddie Peralta? Is he a guy that will come back before the season's over, or is that a guy that I kind of needed to just say, well, I'll drop him and maybe Vince can go get him?
So good news and bad news on this one.
Okay.
What do you want first?
Let's do
Let's
bad.
put the bad first.
Yeah.
Bad news. Okay, so the bad news is, like you said, he's on the 60-day DL, and this is not a minor problem. Good news is it's not a major one either. It's not the rotator cuff, technically speaking. This muscle is one of the muscles that assists in internal rotation, which is as you're throwing and your arm is coming forward. So it's not the rotator cuff muscles, which we hear a lot about people having issues with and potentially having to have surgery with. So it's one of the muscles that is important in throwing motion, however. It's the teres major muscle, which is what they reported, which is also known as Lat's little helper. So it's a muscle kind of in the back of the shoulder blade, doesn't quite function the same way as the rotator cuff muscles do, but is still part of the throwing motion. And for that reason, it can affect your pitch. So obviously, I think they did an MRI and they saw that this muscle was inflamed and strained, which means that it's probably got some degree of tearing in that muscle tissue or that tendon. And so, this is one of those things that takes a while for this to heal. And if you try to pitch through it, that's when you can potentially injure the rotator cuff. So the good news is he probably will be back. They're saying, I think August, September sometime is when the 60-day DL timeframe will be up. And I expect that he'll make a full recovery and not need surgery. He almost likely does not need surgery for this. So that's good news. Bad news is he's on 60-day DL, and he's probably not going to be doing much throwing for at least probably the first 6 to 8 weeks, if not longer. That's the downside too.
What's the chances of him, because I know they've said they want him to come back and get a couple starts before the playoffs is their goal, and which would end up being in our fantasy playoffs, basically, when he comes back. So you come off that injury, your first game activity, what are you looking like? Are you looking at short innings, or because they'll work him back, of course, through their rehab process and all that kind of stuff. But if he comes back and he's eligible, back up in the majors, starting pitching, is he something that a fantasy owner should look at because he could help you in the playoffs? He's still owned by 82% of teams right now. So a lot of people aren't letting them go. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, if you can afford to hold on to him, it might be worth it come playoff time. The key with this recovery is going to be when he starts throwing. That's going to really be the thing that kind of sets the timetable for when he gets back out on the mound, because the earlier he can get to throwing, and that's going to be based on his symptoms and probably repeat scans and physical exams, it will kind of dictate whether he can get a few rehab starts under his belt before he gets back up to the bigs. So, when that's going to happen is going to be hard to tell. But the downside for this is initially he's going to be shut down for quite a while where he's not going to be throwing at all. And that's going to be the thing that's going to really kind of stretch this out a little longer than most other injuries. So I would keep an eye on when he starts throwing again, because that's going to be the thing that kind of will really kind of help gauge when he comes back.
I texted Greg Council, which is Craig Council's twin brother, and he says they're playing catch already in Arizona with them. That was actually mid-June that he was already playing catch, not pitching, of course, but throwing a little bit there and things like that.
And so we should be clear. I think he went on the 60-day in May, right? It was in May sometime. He didn't go on recently, so he's been shut down for a while already. So that's a good sign if he's already throwing.
May 22nd was his last game. He pitched 3 innings. And, it's funny, Kevin, you kind of bashed Peralta. How dare you? In the games leading up to his injury that he went out in ESPN leagues, he scored, in our league, he scored 34 points, 22 points, 17 points, 23 points in the games leading up to the game he finally went out injured. So his ERA, not great, but he was putting up some fantasy value there right before the injury too. And like all the Brewers pitchers, and Kevin, we've talked about this before, but the same was true. Yeah. Burns didn't start great. Woodruff didn't start great, but now Burns and Woodruff are rolling, and hopefully Peralta comes back playoff time, both in real playoffs and fantasy playoffs, and leads some guys to some World Series championships.
So that's good. It sounds like he's right on schedule, because that's about 6 weeks now that he probably hasn't been throwing, and now he's throwing. So that's good. If they're saying August, that sounds realistic at this point if he's doing well.
Well, I have to say, Vince, that I think I was giving him ultimate praise when I was saying he was going in the top, first round of the draft.
Right.
His other 2 counterparts were maybe Freddie Peralta, not so much.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. No, Peralta was going, I think, third round to fourth, fifth round, somewhere in that range for a lot of people, because he had such a great year last year. So there was a lot of thinking. I drafted him 29th overall. So that's second round, right? Third round.
that's right there at the turn. You probably got him because you were down there at the back end of the draft. So yeah, you probably got him at the turn, I'd say.
Yeah. So yeah, I like him.
Okay.
So let's stick with pitchers. We got more pitchers to talk about.
We got pitchers up the wazoo. So
Jack Flaherty in St. Louis. Again, another guy that kind of came back, made a start, looked like he maybe coming back, and then kind of went back on the IL again. He's a guy that has, ace potential to a degree especially for the team. So, but he's been out again. So what's Flaherty looking like?
So from what I read, he's back on the 15-day DL with what they're calling a shoulder strain. And I use this term very lightly because I hate that's very generic. It's hard to kind of get a read on this. Now, the president of their baseball operations in an article I read did say that there was no structural damage in his shoulder, which tells me that they obviously got an MRI, which almost every baseball player does in the Major League Baseball in MLB. So that's a good sign. But this always makes me a little weary when I hear this because like a lot of other things in medicine, nothing's 100%. So an MRI is not always 100%. It could be something very subtle that is just not visible. But if this is his second stint with this shoulder strain, this season alone,
which it is,
that tells me that there's got to be something going on. Something's off, whether it be his mechanics or there is something structurally wrong in his shoulder. This doesn't usually happen at this level. Guys just don't get shoulder discomfort, shoulder strains without something being off. So tread with caution. This might not be the end of his stint on the IL. Potentially, this may not be a good season going forward for him either. It sounds like he had some pretty bad starts between his first stint and his second stint, which is not.
Yeah, it only pitched 8 innings total, and it wasn't pretty.
Yeah, and that's concerning. I mean, that means that something's still not right. He was cleared enough to go back out in the field, but obviously he couldn't perform. So that tells me there's something going on. Whether they just don't know what it is yet, or maybe it hasn't come to fruition on the scans, I don't know. But when I hear these terms getting thrown around and I read about what's going on with these guys like this, in this circumstance, it is concerning. So I would tread with caution on him.
Yeah, especially because he missed the first 2 months of the season.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like I said, he pitched the 8 innings. Now he's back on the injured list. And so this has been going on. We're in July now. This has been going on for 3 months. And so, Brian, like you're saying, if we're 3 months into this and they still don't know for sure what's up, that's not good.
Yeah, and he went 3 innings against Pittsburgh, 3 innings against Milwaukee, 2 innings against the Cubs. That's his 8 innings. So it's 3 different games. He hasn't made it past 3 innings in those games. And then, again, what they're saying, what St. Louis is saying is we're just shutting them down, and then we're going to check them again in a couple weeks. It's like it's not even we're doing this or we're trying this. It was, no, we're just shutting everything down. This was about a week ago. And they said for 2 weeks, we're just going to shut them down. And then we'll check on them again and see where we're at. So, Brian, when they do that, what does that mean?
I mean, that could mean a myriad of things. You got to treat every athlete different. I mean, a lot of this is very subjective as well. You have the scans to kind of provide some objectivity and give you some, insight as to what may be going on from a medical standpoint. But a lot of this is subjective. I mean, you got to treat each athlete different. Not every case is the same. Shutting it down could mean literally shutting it down and him just doing nothing for the next few weeks while they try and figure out what's going on, see if his symptoms resolve. Maybe he feels a little better, examining him then in 2 weeks and seeing where he's at. It could mean just sticking to the rehab and not doing any throwing. It could mean focusing on something else, mechanics. It could mean a lot of things. Most of the time, though, shutting it down doesn't mean shutting it down. They're doing something on the back end behind closed doors that we don't know or can't see, where they're staying in shape. They're doing some type of conditioning. They're probably doing some shoulder therapy. But you got to treat every case differently. And this sounds like one of those circumstances. It sounds like the medical team's probably just as much frustrated and not quite sure as to what's going on as he is. That's what it tells me.
It sounds to me like he's not going to be a part of my roster.
I'm with you, Kev.
Okay.
This is helpful. This has been really good so far, by the way.
Yeah. So So since we're talking about pitchers, and as I stated earlier, even though I'm wearing a Houston jersey right now, that was for my birthday. You know what I'm saying? So, I am a Dodger guy. And so we're talking about 60-day ILs, and we got Walker Buehler, who's on the 60-day IL. And you talk about, Vince, I talked bad about, well, I didn't say I talked bad about him, but Walker Buehler is in the same position as Freddie Peralta because he was supposed to be the ace of the Dodger staff, and he has a 4.02 ERA.
Yeah.
That's not staff material right there. And so he's on the 60-day with the right elbow issue. And so, Brian, what do you see? Do us Dodger fans have any hope of seeing him back at 100% this year?
It's good. He's going to be out a while. I'm not exactly sure when he went down, but they're saying 10 to 12 weeks. And apparently, while he has been on the injured list, he had arthroscopic elbow surgery to remove some bone chips or loose bodies in his elbow, which doesn't necessarily change the recovery. He had a flexor tendon strain in the elbow. So usually with that, they're going to treat that very cautiously because if you try to come back too soon from that, what you end up doing is stressing the ulnar collateral ligament. And that's the worst thing you could do as a pitcher because then you're talking Tommy John. So, rather than
let's not go there.
Yeah, nobody wants to go down that road, believe me. So, it sounds like he had these elbow chips in his elbow for many years and just never got it addressed and used this opportunity to have his elbow cleaned out. Does this set him back? They're saying no, I think from the overall time frame, but it definitely makes his floor a little lower. So he's got a little higher to climb to get back to where he needs to be come getting on the mound. And that part of it, is definitely going to affect his ability to get back to 100%. It's going to take a while.
It doesn't look like, he's going to be back before September from what they're saying.
I don't think so.
So fantasy wise, it's not going to, I probably won't play a big role in this year's fantasy team. But let's get real for a second. And if he comes back in September, gives him about a month, a little less than a month before the playoffs start, real playoffs start. Is he someone that the Dodgers can count on? Is this injury something that's going to hamper him until he gets a lot more rest? Or can he come back from this and actually pitch well when he gets back?
So when he gets back and he gets back to 100%, he should pitch very well. Having those loose bodies or those bone chips in his elbow addressed are probably going to make him feel a lot better. The problem is getting him to that point where he's able to go 100%. Like I said, he's starting from a lower floor now. If he was just coming back from the tendon strain, his floor is a little higher. So now he's got a lower floor. He's going to have to work a little bit harder to get back to where he needs to be. But once he does get there, I would imagine he's actually going to feel great, having dealt with those elbow chips for several years apparently. So
Kevin, I almost traded for Walker Buehler this week in another league. And the piece that I was going to give up was Wander Franco. Now I wasn't going to give him up straight up because of the injury issue. I was going to be looking to add other pieces, and we couldn't agree on the other person. Yeah, Franco will be back though before Buehler. But I'm looking at this now and thinking, Buehler might be back in time for fantasy playoffs or at least fantasy championship. So, Kevin, are you comfortable with Walker Buehler, keeping him in a non-keeper league? Are you comfortable with keeping him on your roster, taking up an IL space? Are you looking to trade him? Are you going to drop him? Like, what's the mindset with where he is?
Well, if he stays on track to come back this season, Walker Buehler is one of those pitchers. I don't think you can't cast him loose, I don't think. And I don't think you can trade him because he's injured. So what are you going to get in return? And so you're kind of stuck. It's the same thing with Freddie Peralta. You're not going to drop that guy. You're not going to drop a guy like Walker Buehler. And so I think, unlike Steven Strasberg, where you could set him loose and not lose any sleep over that, if you were to cast Walker Buehler, that might cause you a couple of sleepless nights. So I don't think I would be looking to do much, if anything, with him.
Yeah, I'd come back to bite you. I would trade him if I could get something for him. I don't own Walker Buehler in any leagues right now.
I don't either.
But I would trade him. See, like I said, when I was trying to acquire him this week, the idea was I was getting him plus one other pretty solid guy. And in exchange for Franco, and I've got shortstops, so I could afford to lose Franco, but I wasn't, I was not giving up Franco for Bueller just 1-on-1 because Franco is going to play a whole lot more games than Bueller is for me this year. But I know a keeper league, I definitely wouldn't trade him. And I would.
League, no. If you're going to drop him, let me know that so I can, set my alarm and I'll wake up and I'll get him.
Any other pitchers on your list, Kev?
Well, one guy I think that we need to mention is Chris Sale.
Oh yeah,
because he it looks like he's going to make his season debut on Tuesday against Tampa Bay, and he had a stress fracture of his rib cage that has not allowed him to pitch. And it seems like, Brian, that if you have a problem with your rib cage, that pretty much kind of affects everything you do, whether you're throwing, whether you're running. Isn't that the way isn't that the way it works? Your rib cage, it kind of limits everything you can do.
Yeah, and especially if you're a pitcher, it's your core, and anytime your core is affected, it hampers your ability to transfer the energy from your legs up through your arm and out through the ball when you throw. So, pitchers, that's something they don't mess around with their core, and you'd be surprised how actively they train those parts of their body when they're not pitching. In fact, most pitchers on their days off are in the gym doing legs and core work. And most people don't see that because they're not in the dugouts or on the sidelines with them. But yeah, I mean, it's a very important part of the kinetic chain, we call it, where the being able to take the forces from your lower body and thrust them out through the hand into the ball and get that exit velocity on that pitch. It's super important. So you don't mess around with core injuries. And stress fractures, unfortunately, take a long time to get better, no matter where they are in the body. So couple that with the core, and then you're really on the shelf for a while. But judging by the way he reacted in the tunnel in his most recent minor league rehab start, I'd say he's feeling pretty good. I mean, he was thrashing around down in the tunnel there, destroying stuff. He was using a lot of his core.
I've heard. I didn't see it for myself, but I heard about it.
Oh yeah, I mean, he was using a lot of his core. He was getting in, so he looks pretty good. I think he'll do just fine.
Oh, Kevin, that's what I wanted to ask you, and I'm sad that you haven't seen the video of this. But you're looking at him; his outing wasn't great. That's hence the reason he was tearing shelves off the wall. He didn't pitch well, yet he's going to start back in the majors on Tuesday. So as a fantasy owner,
Bay is probably not the best team he could go up against.
Yeah, what are you looking at as a fantasy-wise thing? Because he was drafted late. He was number 170 in our draft by our fearless leader, Mike. And he's held on to him for this exact moment for him to make this return. I don't know. I guess the way I look at it, the way that he pitched in his rehab starts, I go, I don't think I want Chris Sale on my roster right now.
Well, seeing as how he's Chris Sale, and you have him, and he's getting ready to get back, it's way too late to drop him at this point. I don't think that's the answer at all. So I don't know if I'll be so quick to put him in my starting lineup.
Yeah,
Tuesday against Tampa.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that you'd have to activate him, of course, but then nothing says you have to start him right away. Yeah. And so I would see how he does, and hopefully he's not. That's the Boston clubhouse where they had the chicken incident years ago, wasn't it? So hopefully he's not throwing around, chicken wings or whatever else down there after this start against Tampa. So, I would wait and see what's what before I'm putting him in my lineup.
All right, so a couple things there, Kev. If you're Tommy Pham, you say you've got to activate him, but you don't have to activate him unless you want to add people to your roster, right? You can have
right. If you hopefully you're active in our league, which our fearless leader is.
Yeah.
And so you're not gonna you lock your roster if you're gonna do something like that.
Yeah.
And so I don't think we have that worry with Mike. He's going to get him on his roster, and so, but that leaves up a question, Vince, because let's say you drop somebody, right? You're going to have to drop somebody, Then my plan would be if somebody was on the IL I was interested in, I would add him to my roster, take Chris Lale off, and put that guy right back on my IL. Now, that's the kind of thing that might wind up getting me slapped by somebody like Tommy Pham, but I would do that.
No, I agree. I love stashing injured guys. If I have an open injury, either I have one or I know I'm going to have one coming up, 100% I'll grab a guy that's on the injured list that I think has potential and stash them there in the injured list. But I want to come back to this question, Kev, with Chris Sale. My thought is I want to trade him tonight or tomorrow before his start. I want to trade him and try to get something for him versus wait till Tuesday and he comes out, throws 3 innings, gives up 9 runs. Now I can't trade him because nobody wants him unless we got drunk Boston Red Sox fans in our league, which we very well may have.
Don't.
Do we not have any?
I don't believe we do.
Okay.
If he pitched for Philadelphia, we have 2 guys we can immediately go to.
Yes. Yeah. I think the one Boston guy we have he's not really paying attention in the league anymore. But anyways, my thing is I'd trade him tonight or tomorrow and try to get a solid piece in return. And I'd be okay even if he goes nuts and has a great game. I just don't think he's going to have a great game.
Right. I echo that, Vince. So, Mike, if you're happening to watch this, if you're trying to trade him to me, that's probably not going to be your strategy. Okay. Because I'm not going to be taking him. So maybe Vince, maybe you could hit him up. I don't know.
Yeah,
but,
we'll see.
Yeah,
for the right price. Let's get on to some hitters, Kev. We've been on.
Yes, let's do that because there are some hitters, and usually on our show we have 2 guys, as I just mentioned, that are Philadelphia Philly guys, and so they'll be back. I would imagine next week. But Brian, so we're talking about Bryce Harper right here. When he was injured, he might have been the National League most valuable player. And this was already after he had his thing where he had to get, was it plasma or whatever? And so he couldn't play the field anymore. He was just going to be a hitter, which proved to be his demise because he was hit by a pitch. And so his left thumb, he just had surgery by that. And so when your left thumb is it fractured or is it broken, Brian?
Same thing.
Same thing. Okay. So if you have Bryce Harper, what kind of thing? How long does the take to get healthy? And once he is he going to be able to swing the bat as good as he ever did?
So I'm not sure the exact injury, but it must have been pretty significant for them to have to fix it surgically, which is tells me it was either at one of the areas where the joint is, or it was so displaced, the fracture, that there was no way it was going to heal in a proper position. They were forced to fix it. So it must have been pretty bad. That being said, he's already now about 2 weeks out from surgery. I think he had surgery June 25th. So they're saying, from what I've read last, is that he's going to be cleared to start doing some stuff in about 2 to 3 weeks. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it was on his throwing hand, right? Was it his right hand?
I would imagine if he was hit by the pitch, it was probably
left.
Oh, it was his left hand? He's left-handed, is he not?
He's a left-handed hitter.
He's a left-handed hitter, sorry. But he's probably going to be at least 6 to 8 weeks for that fracture to heal. Now, you could probably start doing stuff by 4 weeks if you feel confident in the fixation. If the surgeon feels confident, they may let him start doing some things at that 4-week mark. It sounds to me like he's probably going to be out at least until after the All-Star break, though.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Harper's one of those guys that he was having a really good season. You hate it for him.
He had 15 homers. He had 9 stolen bases. He was hitting .318. And so, he was right up there. Paul Goldschmidt has since surpassed him, I think, for the National League MVP right now, which, by the way, if you go to Belly Up Fantasy website, I have my mid-season picks for MVP and also pitcher and disappointments. So get over there as soon as we're done to the Belly Up Fantasy website. My article's right there, and you'll see what I'm talking about.
Kevin, we got to talk about Fernando Tatis. He was a
There's
conversation
no
before the draft, conversation during the draft. He's been out all this time, and I don't have him in our league. I do have him in a keeper league, and obviously still have him. Actually, I tried to trade him the other day, but I was going to get a haul back, and obviously it didn't happen. But Tatis is nearing his at least warm-ups, right? So we're seeing some progress there. Brian, let's start with you on this because I know Kevin has some thoughts on what he should do when he does come back. But Fernando Tatis had surgery right before the season started. Again, kind of the same question we've been asking. When he does return, how long will that be? And then how effective will he be when he does return?
Yeah, so he had what's called a scaphoid fracture in his wrist, which is an injury that can often go undiagnosed because it can sometimes be it doesn't always present itself on x-rays and imaging studies like MRIs, sometimes for several weeks after the original injury occurred. And so often you'll treat it like a sprain, and then boom, all of a sudden you notice, hey, there's an actual fracture there. And that's a very common kind of storyline for that particular injury. So I'm not sure when his injury occurred, but yes, I think he had surgery back in March. He's, I think, been cleared to start doing full swings in 2 weeks. So he's still got some time. And the reason for that is this injury takes a long time to heal, whether you have surgery or not. And they're always very careful about letting players do too much too soon, because if the fixation fails, then you're in a big heap of trouble, because it becomes very difficult to then treat if you've already had a failed surgical procedure. So they're not going to, take chances on that one, because this can potentially cause a lot of major problems for a baseball player, especially an offensive player swinging a bat. So they're saying, I think, projecting him to come back after the All-Star break. He's going to be rusty. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Not being able to take a full swing for at least another 2 weeks, I mean, you're talking months where he hasn't been able to really do it. So, it's going to take him a while to kind of get in sync, get his rhythm and timing back. I wouldn't expect him to do anything great right out of the gates once he does come back. But, he's young. He's a phenomenal player. I think toward the end of the season is probably when he'll really pick up.
All right, Kev. So that brings it back to you, right? Risk versus reward with Tatis on your roster and non-keeper league settings. Obviously, keeper league settings is a different story.
Yeah, if you've got Fernando Tatis, which Dan does in our league, and he's talked about this on the show before, and if you have Fernando Tatis, you've got to ride the wave to whatever you ride. If it arrives and he turns into being the Fernando Tatis of old, then you're good. If he turns into being maybe 70% of, you ride that. There's no chance that you drop him 0. And I don't know if you could trade him for something that would be worthy of a Fernando Tatis type player, because you don't know what, and especially when you consider Fernando Tatis is one of the most violent swingers, if you will, that baseball has seen in a long time. Because remember last year, he could hurt himself on a swing.
Yeah.
And so this is not the kind of thing that looms well, I don't think, going forward, because if he can't contain himself when he's at the plate, and that's one of the things that makes him so great as a player, then either he's going to hurt himself again or he's not going to be as good as he was. I don't think.
But you bring up a good point, Kevin.
Yeah, you got to ride it out to the end, I think.
You bring up an interesting point, and this is something that kind of goes with this injury, is when was this really an issue for him? Was this a problem that dates back to last year that now required surgery? That becomes a little bit more concerning from a medical standpoint, because those injuries tend to be a little bit more difficult to kind of bounce back from and get back to 100%, like your pre-injury level. If this was an acute type of fracture that they recognized right away and fixed, outcomes are a little bit better. I expect him to be as close to the Tatis Jr. as old. But if this was something that they let go for a while, maybe they didn't diagnose it right away, which can often happen, or he kind of played through it, didn't say anything, and then got it addressed, that becomes a little more concerning, because that means the long-term effects of this may be more substantial.
Brian, you've worked in baseball, correct? I mean, that's one of the sports that you've worked in.
I did. When back in my athletic trainer days, I did some time in AAA back with the Baltimore Orioles organization. It was a short stint, but it was awesome. And I got to work alongside one of the Milwaukee Brewers' longtime trainers, Al Price, who was part of the World Series team with the Milwaukee Brewers back in the 80s. So I learned a lot during that time I was there, and baseball was always a passion of mine when it came to sports medicine stuff. So yeah, I did do a little bit of time there.
All right, so let me ask you this, and I thought so. That's why I wanted to clarify it for our listeners too, so they understood. Because sometimes, as much as I love Belly Up, sometimes we have guys come on that on different shows and they are just guessing, and you're not guessing. So we appreciate that. Yeah,
no, we appreciate expertise, and we've got it right here. So
no, I've been doing this a long time. I've been doing this like over 20 years in total. I've been a PA now for the past 16 years. This is my everyday job. This is what I do.
So with Tatis, because we've talked before on this show about, well, he could come back and just play DH because when he's playing the field, he dives. He's constantly giving his body up. So with this injury that he has, if he just plays DH, is he pretty safe with that on this injury? And basically, I guess what I'm asking is the fielding more of an issue or the batting more of an issue with the injury that he has right now?
Well, so I mean, they both kind of play into this equally, I think. But the issue with being in the field is that you never know when you're going to have to pan out, lay out for a catch, and usually this injury occurs when you're trying to reach or outstretch your hand and land directly on the wrist. Now, usually those guys will brace themselves up, they'll wrap their wrist with something protective, or at least give themselves support. So, I mean, the odds of that happening again are pretty slim. But when you're batting, I mean, you're constantly having to torque your wrist. There's a lot of motions involved, not just flexion, extension, but you're also talking about supination, pronation, rotating the wrist. There's many different planes that you're moving the wrist in. And so that definitely puts a lot more stress that you can't necessarily protect. I mean, you can only wear so much on your wrist while you're swinging. You need some of that freedom of that movement. So I feel like it becomes a lot more difficult to kind of brace it and support it while you're swinging and playing an offense. But at the same time, there's always a risk defensively of injuring it again if you have to lay out for a catch. I mean, you got to weigh what's more important. If this guy's a real superstar in the bat in his hand, then I think you got to gear him to do that going forward more full time, right? I mean, if you can always find a good fielder.
Because they're putting him in the outfield last year. Now they don't even have to do that. They can just put him at DH.
And that's a huge thing for the National League this year, getting that DH.
It is.
I mean, it's for a lot of teams, it's game changing.
Yeah, I agree. Kev, you got one more? I want to talk all-star stuff. So let's do one more guy.
So the guy that's also on my team that I'm interested in is Ozzie Albie, the second baseman of Atlanta, who, as we all know, is one of the spark plugs of their entire offense. He's batting up there in the number 2 hole. And he is one of the guys that Atlanta, they didn't play very well to start with, but he's always been consistent. Mm-hmm. But it's kind of weird, Brian, because all he did was swing the bat, and then he wound up hurting himself just by, I guess he just put his foot down wrong. Yeah. So if you got a guy like him and he's on a 60-day IL, what do we do with him?
I don't think he's going to have any lingering long-term effects from this. Now, there are some foot injuries, fractures in particular, that can be very devastating to the midfoot. You hear a lot about these in football players, Liz Frank injuries. It doesn't sound like he's had that. If he did, they would have diagnosed it right away. He would have probably already had surgery. So,
he did.
He did have surgery.
He did have surgery. He had surgery on his left foot fracture right after it happened.
June 15th.
Well, that's a game. Well, that changes everything then. I didn't catch that in my research. See, this is why you guys are the experts when it comes to the fantasy world.
This is why people need to be tuning into our show.
When it comes to our rosters, we're aware.
Between all the patients I see,
I may not be so in tune, but he's on my roster.
Yeah.
And so as soon as this happened, I was checking it out. So
man, it depends on where those fractures were and what they had to do to fix them. But if assuming it's not a Liz Frank, which I hope it's not, because that would be a devastating injury.
I haven't seen anything like that. So
I haven't seen that mentioned either. 6 to 8 weeks before that thing heals, before he's allowed to probably start doing any type of major high impact like running, jumping, any of that stuff. But you're probably looking at closer to 12 weeks before he's really back doing all kinds of baseball stuff regularly.
That puts him right there at the fantasy playoffs, like some of these other guys we've been talking about.
Yeah, this is not a good time of year to get hurt and have to go on the IL. This is like you're right at the cusp of the season. You're heading into the All-Star break. It's either good or bad, right? You either get the time to rest and come back full strength, or it's the worst time to go out because you're looking at maybe jeopardizing the rest of the season. So it's like not a good time.
No, it sure isn't. So that was my list, Vince.
Yeah.
You had anybody else?
No, I think that's good. I greatly enjoyed this, Brian, and the knowledge and the information you've given us has been incredibly helpful. I think our listeners will really love this too, and I'm glad we did this, Kev.
Yeah, I am too. And the guys that are watching us need to get over there to the Injured List podcast that Brian's doing. And when is that on, Brian?
So, during the football season, I'm pretty much every week because there's just so much to cover. I kind of float a little bit more by the seat of my pants in the off season when it comes to football. So I got episodes kind of sporadically. I try to do it every 2 weeks. Try to help you guys out during the baseball season and the hockey season with by going on other shows and doing some injury updates. So you can always catch me somewhere. What we should do, actually, guys, I've been meaning to tell you this, Vince, too, is we should have a follow up to see where we're at toward the end of the year and how accurate I was with these guys.
You tell us when you want to be on, Brian. We'll make it happen.
Well, take a look at your rosters and see when these guys are supposed to come back, and then we'll talk and see how accurate or how inaccurate I was come the time toward July, August, or actually we're August, September.
Well, yeah, we're already in July.
So August, September, because that's when a lot. It's really going to make a difference. But I have an episode coming out this Friday. I'm actually doing some race car stuff. Robert Wickens was an IndyCar driver who sustained horrific injuries at a race in Pocono in 2018, and he just made a comeback to motorsports, which is quite amazing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about his injuries, the extent of them, and pretty bad stuff. So I'm going to drop that episode on Friday, and then I've been working with Belly Up and all the guys in Belly Up trying to help out and do some shows for them. So I'll be on a couple other shows throughout the course of the summer here. So you can always find
There's certainly quite enough shows on Belly Up. And any of you guys that are hosting Belly Up shows that are watching this, Brian's right here. So
he had Brian had an episode back on the 10th of June with Rodolfo Martinez interview with him. Great episode. I really enjoyed it. I'd encourage people to go back and listen to that one. The others too, but I really enjoyed that one. As he's worked with soldiers and worked in athletics and all that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, I don't think, I try to do episodes like that because I don't think people understand like just how involved sports medicine is and what various other areas that it kind of touches on. I mean, he works with a fighter squadron out of Louisiana, taking care of guys who are flying F-18 Hornets. So it's pretty cool stuff. You don't know that those people are around doing these things, but sports medicine experts, athletic trainers, physician assistants, they're all over. Doing all kinds of cool stuff. And Rodolfo was one of the guys I got to talk to, and he has a pretty cool story to share. So he's a big baseball guy too, by the way.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So that's pretty much all I have, Vince.
Yeah. Brian, thank you. And
Brian, thanks so much for coming on.
Get you back on again sometime.
All right, guys. Good luck with your roster decisions.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. So I don't think anything could have worked out better than what we just experienced right there. And before I forget, Vince, and I should have mentioned this way back in the beginning, because we do have a sponsor of this show, of this fine show right now. And we have a fine sponsor, which is intheclutch.com. And so they've got all kinds of officially licensed merchandise. And baseball, of course, is on there. They've got the most stuff of baseball, but that's not all. They got hockey with the Colorado Avalanche just winning the Stanley Cup. You can go over there and get Colorado stuff. They've got Golden State just won the NBA championship. They've got Golden State stuff. And so just get over there. We're going to be finishing up here in a few minutes. Go over to intheclutch.com and put in Belly Up Fantasy in the code and get your 10% off. So I want to make sure I get that in there. Fine sponsor needs to be shouted out. So there we go.
Yeah.
All right, Vince. So we wanted to drop something about the All-Star game, and I got the rosters right here. I have to say I don't really have a problem with any of the picks from the American League. people are all upset because Shohei Ohtani got in over Yordan Alvarez, but now it is completely moot because Alvarez is not playing anyway. Over in the National League, Ronald Acuna, I've got a problem with that. He started up the season injured. He is not having an all-star caliber season, but we all know it's a popularity thing. But Jock Peterson is a guy that really mystifies me as to why I don't know if the Slap Fest helped him out there or just what was going on.
Well, who do you put in his place?
What's that?
Who do you put in his place?
Well, that's a good question. And because that's always a question, because if you take somebody off, right?
Yeah.
Who are you going to put? Well, usually the other way when people argue why put him on my team, who are you going to take off?
Yeah.
I've got the guy I'm going to take off, Jock Peterson. And let's see, reserves.
Is Marte
we can
starting?
make an argument for Kyle Schwarber, who's hitting 700 home runs, I think, in July. So
yeah,
Schwarber. The other one is, this is what mystifies me, Vince. Juan Soto. What in the world? And he's a reserve.
Yeah.
And the only reason why he's there is because Washington Nationals have to have a representative.
Yes. Yeah, that's true.
So, and I wrote about him in my article that I mentioned earlier. He's being the most disappointing fantasy player in all of baseball in the first half. I don't think anyone can seriously argue that point.
Yeah, we said Josh Bell should have been the Nationals representative, but we also said
he should, and he's on my fantasy team, so I could sit there and shout his name from the rooftops because, and I pointed that out in my article. He's hitting over 300.
Yeah,
Bell is.
Yeah.
So what's Juan Soto's excuse? He doesn't have one.
Yeah.
So what's your reaction to the rosters?
Yeah, 4 snubs that didn't make even the reserves list. Ty France has had a great start.
He should definitely be there. No question about that.
He should be there. Austin Reilly, phenomenal season as well.
Yeah, you can make an argument for him.
2 pitchers, Dylan Cease in Chicago has been
on my team, so I'm with you.
And then Devin Williams for the Brewers. I really thought he would make it. He's had a bounce back year, very good year. Of course, Hader and Burns are both on there, but Devin Williams, is there a better setup man in baseball right now than Devin Williams? I don't know.
And that's his issue right there is a setup man, and he's one of the, if not the best.
Yeah.
But setup men, no, we don't want you. Go ahead and hit the bricks. But you can make an argument for him to be there. And so, the funny part about it is, you got these guys from the Angels. Of course, Ohtani deserves to be there. Yeah. And Trout deserves to be there. And I've noticed that. And so I've noticed that Trout and Ohtani go, 3 for 5 between the two of them. 2 home runs, 5 RBIs. Angels lose 8-6.
Yeah, Trout's been bad here recently, but
he's had a couple of dry spells. He was 0 for 26 earlier.
You're right.
And now, but you're not going to keep Mike Trout out of the All-Star game.
No, you're not.
You drive him to Mexico and leave him down there or something. Yeah. But he's going to be in the All-Star.
Can't do it.
So, all right. So that pretty much brings us in for a landing right there. Join us next week because we'll be back on our normal schedule. And I promise, we're talking about players that you either need to add, you either need to drop them, or you just need to hold steady. And we'll be talking about that. And we'll get some more into some more All-Star because there are some guys, of course, that won't go. And so maybe these guys that we said got snubbed will be there. So, and that's Sunday right before the All-Star game next Sunday. So Vince, where are you out there? We know you're out there. You're out there in just about every corner of the globe, but narrow it down for us.
Yeah, and we're breaking news this week, Kev. So on Sports Stove podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, our midweek episode is Local Hour. We cover Eastern Kentucky University sports. There's a huge scandal going on with the softball team, softball coach with some bad behavior and some different things. And
I saw that you were saying that before.
Yeah, it's not pretty. The university hasn't fired her yet, but they've got to. If they don't, it'll get really, really ugly. So we'll be breaking that down. I actually have the local reporter coming on to talk about it this week. And we give the best coverage for Eastern Kentucky sports, dive deep into the football team. Right now we're doing position previews. So we got tight end coach and the starting tight end in this week as well. So follow us on social media at Sports Stove Podcast, wherever you get your podcast.
There you go. Because if it weren't for you, Vince, I wouldn't even know Eastern Kentucky existed. So you're doing a great service for them. And I don't know, the university should be like on a first name basis with the university president and the chancellor and athletic director. And
I'll say, Kev, the athletic director has been on my show.
Okay.
See him at games and stuff. And the university's been phenomenal. I have a great relationship with the football coach, basketball, men's and women's basketball coach, the baseball coach as well. I had the softball coach on for one episode. I don't know her well, but the other coaches, I've been able to build a relationship with them and with a number of the athletes as well. University has been phenomenal and a great help. The president, I've not talked to the president. I've seen him at games and stuff like that, but not had him on the show either. But needless to say, I love the university. They've been phenomenal to me. Nothing to complain about with them.
All right. So there you have it. And I am fully back. And tomorrow I will be on the TSS Fantasy Show as they'll be discussing the Cincinnati Bengals, whom, since the Bengals are cats, we are obligated to like them in this household. And so I will be on the show talking about the Bengals tomorrow. So you definitely want to make sure that you check that out. And I'm always on Sunday mornings on the Belly Up Fantasy Live Football Dynasty edition. We just did a show this morning. And so if you haven't checked that out, need to get over there to Belly Up. All the places Belly Up can be found, and you'll find it there. And so that pretty much brings us to a halt right here. And everybody have a great week out there. And you have a great week too, Vince.
Thank you, Kevin. You also. And again, thanks to Brian Scott, Injured List Podcast.
Thank you so much to Brian for coming on here. And he is certainly welcome back. Just tell us when you want to come, and we'll make it happen.
All right. Thanks, Kev. And thank you all for watching.
Thank you.